For nearly 3 decades, Hugh Jackman told the world the same thing. In interviews, on red carpets, during award speeches, in anniversary posts seen by millions. He said his wife, Deborra-Lee, was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. Not once, not occasionally, constantly, so consistently that people stopped questioning it. Their marriage became one of those rare Hollywood stories the public wanted to believe was real. A relationship that survived fame, distance, rumors, and time itself. But then, after nearly 30 years together, the divorce became official in June 2025. And only months later, reports began surfacing that Hugh was already planning a future with someone else. And suddenly, people started asking a very uncomfortable question. How long had the public version of this marriage been different from the private one? Because what changed everything was not the divorce itself. It was what came after. For almost 2 years after their separation became public, Deborra-Lee barely spoke.
No explosive interviews.
No bitter social media posts. No public attacks. She let the headlines move without feeding them. And honestly, that silence said a lot on its own. But then reports started emerging that Hugh had allegedly proposed to Sutton Foster during a vacation in Costa Rica. Entertainment outlets claimed wedding plans were already being discussed. Friends were supposedly being told the engagement was happening. And according to multiple reports, Hugh reportedly had no intention of signing a prenup. That detail landed hard. Because the fortune he built over nearly 3 decades, estimated at hundreds of millions, had been built during the exact years Deborra-Lee stood beside him through every stage of his rise. And that is when the silence finally broke. But what she chose to say surprised people. Instead of rage, she used one word. Betrayal. Not confusion. Not heartbreak. Betrayal. In a statement released after the divorce filing, Deborra-Lee described the experience as a traumatic journey and called it a profound wound that cuts deep. The wording mattered because she had waited almost 2 years to say anything publicly. When someone stays quiet that long and then carefully chooses a word like betrayal, people pay attention. And maybe the most revealing part was how prepared she appeared to be long before the public knew anything was wrong. Just days before filing for divorce, she reportedly secured sole ownership of their Manhattan penthouse. Quietly. Deliberately. That is not panic. That is planning. But here's where the story becomes much bigger than celebrity gossip. To understand why this ending hits so hard, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Long before Hugh Jackman became Wolverine, before the fame, before Hollywood, Deborra-Lee was already established in Australia's entertainment industry. She had trained in New York at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She had acting credits, awards, recognition. She was respected. Hugh, meanwhile, was fresh out of drama school when they met on the Australian television series Corelli in 1995. She was the lead actress. He was the newcomer getting his first professional role. And according to Hugh's own stories over the years, he fell hard almost immediately. But Deborra-Lee was cautious. She was 13 years older than him and fully understood the judgment that would follow a relationship like that. She reportedly tried to end things early because she feared the age gap would eventually become a problem. Hugh refused to let it go. He told her the age difference meant nothing. 4 months later, he proposed. They married in 1996. She was 40. He was 27. And for the next 27 years, she stood beside a man the world repeatedly labeled one of the sexiest men alive. Every red carpet became a comparison. Every tabloid found ways to talk about their age gap. Every comment section had something cruel to say. But through all of it, Hugh publicly praised her non-stop. He called her his soulmate. The foundation of his life. The reason everything worked. On their 25th anniversary, he wrote that loving her was as natural as breathing. Think about what that does to a person over time. When someone repeats those words publicly and privately for decades, you build your life around them. You trust them completely. At the same time, Her own acting career had to coexist with the reality of being married to one of the busiest movie stars in the world. Relocations, film schedules, international press tours, Broadway runs, the quiet sacrifices that never become headlines, projects she could not commit to, stability she could not guarantee, opportunities shaped around someone else's career trajectory. And that's what people started reconsidering after the divorce. What exactly does a long marriage contain that outsiders never see? Because from the outside, the public saw glamorous photos and affectionate interviews. What they did not see were the compromises, the emotional labor, and the years spent building stability for someone else's rise. Then came another report that raised the stakes even further. Multiple outlets claimed Deborra-Lee was considering writing a memoir about the marriage, the divorce, and everything that happened behind closed doors. According to reports, publishers were interested. Sources claimed she had kept detailed personal notes throughout the separation, a divorce diary. And suddenly, the story shifted again. Because for nearly 30 years, the public narrative belonged mostly to Hugh. He was the one giving interviews, telling love stories, painting the marriage as unbreakable. A memoir would finally give Deborra-Lee control of the narrative in her own words. And apparently, that possibility made people nervous. Sources connected to Hugh reportedly hoped she would decide against writing the book. Not because they thought nobody would care, but because people very clearly would. A woman who stayed silent for 2 years before carefully using the word betrayal is not likely to write carelessly. If that memoir ever happens, it may completely reshape how the public understands this relationship. Because the biggest question surrounding this story now is not simply whether Hugh Jackman fell in love with someone else. Relationships end every day. The real question is much harder than that. How long can public devotion exist after private feelings have already changed? And maybe that is why this story has hit people so deeply. For years, Hugh and Deborra-Lee represented something audiences desperately wanted to believe in. Stability, loyalty, a marriage that survived Hollywood. But the ending forced people to confront something uncomfortable. Public declarations of love can be genuine in the moment they are spoken and still not last forever. A person can mean every word they say and still become someone different later. That possibility is what makes this story feel less like celebrity gossip and more like something painfully human. Because in the end, Deborra-Lee Furness was the one who initially feared the relationship would not survive. She was the cautious one, the one who saw the risks. Hugh was the one who convinced her to stay. He promised the age difference did not matter. Promised she was the person he wanted forever. Nearly 3 decades later, she was not the one who walked away first. And that single detail changes the emotional weight of the entire story. Now people are left waiting for what happens next. Will the reported wedding with Sutton Foster actually happen? Will Deborra-Lee write the memoir everyone is already talking about? And if she finally tells the full story in her own words, will people see it as betrayal, or simply the first time she truly gets to own her side of what happened?